Hello, 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 everybody. I hope you enjoyed your intermission. We're now back with part two. So, in part two, what I'm going to be discussing now that you understand the origin points and where it kind of all began, we're going to be talking about essentially the teaching practices that young Hisoka has learned. So, now you understand the origin points of like the spiritual and religious references. We can get down into the whole meat of the situation. So, this is essentially everything that was either taught or influenced down, brought down to Hisoka. It all starts from birth. From the very moment he was born, there seemed to be some form of initiation. What happens typically whenever someone of Romani origin, and it depends based on your village, from what I've heard, or based on your where you are. Everybody is different. Not everybody tends to do the same thing. So, most likely where he is from, which is pretty much still within the US, but a small sector where it was mostly Hispanic Romani people, what they have probably done when he was born is the following. See, when Hazoa was born, what most likely happened is that he was temporarily separated from his old village for a predetermined amount of time. And this predetermined amount of time depends. It's normally 10 days, but because of the fact they're Hispanic Romani and they most likely practice La Cuarentena, it was probably a total of 40 days. So 10 plus 30. 30 for La Cuarentena, which is normally the time period where people of Hispanic and Latin origins tend to isolate themselves to heal from birth. So a total of 40 days for healing. And that happened for an amount of time. And again, what also is the case is that they believe like after you give birth that essentially you are kind of on the polluted end spiritually and also just like physically dirty, I guess. So they would basically have you like go cleanse yourself. They would have you go pretty much heal yourself. Like they didn't want you to work or do anything. They wanted you to rest. Like it was a time of heavy resting. So that's most likely what happened to his mom. It's like heavy time for resting. It's like we rest in this village. Yeah, very communicative. And you're gonna see how that kind of dies off the older that he gets, but like at first, very communicative. That's just kind of the setting that he was in. It was like, you need something within your basket, you need like some fruit or anything, I'll bring that to you. You know, it's kind of giving like Southern hospitality teas, except they're not in the South, they're more so in our version of the West. But it's like that same attitude of, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, you know? I know that you gave birth to this baby, essentially. You need to rest. It's like, let us take care because you are in a time that is spiritually delicate and profound, I would say. So that's essentially what was going on. It's like it didn't matter if dad was not there, even though it probably would have been ideal if he was. And I theorized in the beginning, but I'm changing my mind with this theory. In the beginning, essentially, I thought that, essentially Hisoka's mom pretty much bounced between like her original home, which was the village, and essentially going to Hisoka's dad's place because the theory I have is essentially Hisoka's dad is more so on the wealthier end. Like he's the wealthy one. Mom is not. So it's kind of similar to his fiance situation, in which the same thing happened with his fiance, where it's like mom originally was not wealthy, dad was, but in the case of his fiance, aka Ulumi, way into the future, we'll talk about that a bit more. Essentially, Kikyo married into the Zoldyck family, and in the case of Hisoka, it's like clearly that did not happen. Two things that probably could have happened behind the scenes, which is this theory that I'm leaning less on. I originally leaned on this more, which was like bounced in between until they felt like it was dysfunctional and they just went their separate ways. I'm more so leaning into this new theory which is essentially, I believe that for some reason, Hisoka's dad went like MIA. Just completely. Just like off the wall, off bracket, just no one can find him. He is a hunter of some kind, or keyword was. I'm not sure if he's living, but Hisoka's dad was a hunter of some kind. And kind of like similar to Jing, he just like went off somewhere. His family does not know where he is either. Where I theorize that his dad might be, it's like, I don't know. I have no idea. But like his family doesn't know. And I don't know if, again, it's like we don't talk about Bruno's situation in which they just hid it. Like they chose not to talk about it. Like I feel like, and I don't know why I'm leaning towards this strongly, but I have a feeling that maybe his dad is like a lost hunter of some kind, and one in which they just don't talk. And I know there were Pacific like people that were on the Dark Continent mission. I don't know why my brain is leaning towards maybe his dad was one of those people, but for some reason, my brain is going there. If I end up being right about that, I'm eating flex tape. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am eating flex tape if I turn out to be right. That essentially the whole reason that we don't hear about his August dad is because he disappeared like Amelia Earhart from the Bermuda Triangle into the Dark Continent. And that's why we can't see this man again. We don't talk about him because we'd rather not be reminded of such a thing. That might be the case. The more I'm thinking about it, the more it's like, that makes sense. But does that make him a good man? Again, considering that, Hisoka is the foil, shadow, dark version of Gon in a lot of ways, I don't think this makes his dad a good man. I don't think he is a good man. I just don't think that particularly matters in the case of his dad just disappearing completely. How he disappeared and pretty much just didn't tell anybody. So, like, his communication's worse. I like, at least with Jing, we have some contact with the man. I just feel like in the case of his dad, it went from some to none at all. It's like, we don't know where this nigga's going. He's just gone. He's just gone. We don't know where he's at. And I feel like it's a Dark Continent situation. The more I think about it, the more it's like, was he one of those people? Which makes the connection to the Zoldyck family even crazier if that turns out to actually be the case. Like, you have a Frisch here, you have a Zoldyck here, and you have a Moro here. One of them did not return. What's up with that? If I turn out to be right about that, again, I'm eating flex tape. But all of that aside, let us continue with the home life of Hisoka with his mom, because that's who he was raised by. We'll probably talk about this more later. It's just something that I want to harp on, because it's like, whoa, what if this turns out to be the truth? It'd be so crazy. But we're going to add on. So, continuing on after that, after they're isolated for some point in time, then godparents. So, pretty much like godparents are like selected guardians. Like, if something bad would happen to you, they take over. For those of you that don't know what godparents are, and they are selected from the village, and the godparents take Hisoka to church to be baptized. So, in their culture, godparents are really important. So, and they give him a small gold cross. And then after the godparents return, there's a feast called Bolimos. Now, I think essentially what happened, if there is a case of godparents in this case, it's like, oh, if he had godparents, it's like, why didn't they take him in if something bad happened to his mom? And clearly something bad happened to his dad. So it's like, why didn't they take him in? It's like, I think, again, and this is just me heavily theorizing, but this is based off the small clues within the pre-canon. It's kind of clue that he might have ran into the big city. Like, there's a small section within what is their version of Vegas that has like a small town section similar to where I live. Like, a lot of places in the US are like this, where it's like you have small town regions and then you have like the big major city. Like, for example, I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So there's Charlotte, North Carolina. There's Uptown Charlotte, the big city. And then you have all the surrounding areas, so like the small town areas and the smaller sections before you hit the big city. He was in a smaller section and then he hit the big city. So he ran away to the big city. So I don't know how far that is, but he ran eventually as soon as his mom died. It was like whatever goal he had in his mind, which I believe was probably the goal of, just making it out, being successful on his own, what have you, he ran to the big city. I don't think any other adult knew, but at the same time, they felt like spiritually they could not stop him because this was fate. This had to happen. They let him be. Now, in real life, that probably would not be the case. To be fair, CPS would have been called straight away, or somebody would have been called to basically chase after a missing child. But in the case of fiction, for the sake of plot, the destiny had to be fulfilled, whatever the case may be. As soon as they found out that he ran away, there's not much that they could do after. So they pretty much just late fate had it. Now, should they have? No, because he ended up homeless and all this horrible stuff happened that we kind of talked about before. But it's, life be crazy. What can I say? And after that, his mom and the elders of the village then celebrate the name. So after the whole birth process, after him being into the world, hello, new human, into the world, you then have a name giving ceremony. So you celebrate giving this new kiddo, this new life, a name, in which his mom would dress him up in this little cute clothes, little ceremonial, shiny, golden clothes. The village astrologer would come in and basically announce the horoscope and be like, oh, this is this child, and this is this child's destiny. You know how it be. It's like reading the fates, reading the cards and doing all this type of divination stuff we will discuss in a minute, and be like, this is this child's fate. This is what this child will be like. And this child was born, in his case, in June. And oh, da 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 da, something something about June babies. He is here into the world. And then he's given his name according to position of the moon in his birth chart. And then his name essentially also follows the tradition that male names within Hindu culture typically are given 6 letters. So it's supposed to have 6 letters, and he does have all 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in his name, and they give it to him. And it's like, aha, this baby is here. He has arrived. This is his name. This is his destiny. This is what's supposed to happen. You cannot stop fate. Da da da. This is what will happen to this child. And they announce it and do all this stuff. So I think in the case of him, I don't think everybody has Nen, but enough people have Nen within his small sector of a town. So like where he was raised in infancy, to the point that it was not weird to these people. Like they were more than okay with powers existing. Like that was just the norm here. It was like you were considered divine of some kind. Divine of some kind. That rhymes. If you had powers within this area. So now we're going to get into the divination. So adding on to what I said previously about like the whole horoscope, destiny, fate, using the different divinations and cards, we're going to talk about what those different kinds of divinations are. So from ages 5 to 10, we are now diving into the different divinations. And the first one that I want to talk about is essentially what fortune telling and divination even is. So before we get into the different types, I want to dive into the basics of what it is. So fortune telling / divination is commonly associated with the Romani people, as divination forms an integral aspect of Romani culture that dates back hundreds of years. So pretty much since the very beginning, this is what they've been doing. The common methods include palmistry, tea leaf reading, cartomancy, tarot reading, and crystal balls. For those of you that don't know about tea leaf reading, it can go into one or two ways. They can either do it dry, or it can be very similar to how they do water divination. So that's just a prerequisite of tea leaf reading. But yeah, let's get into the first one, and then I'll talk about the others, which is cartomancy. So the first basic one, which is what I was highlighting, is cartomancy, which is otherwise known as tarot card reading. So for cartomancy specifically, a tarot card is used in which there are 78 cards, 56 minor arcana cards, and then 22 major arcana cards. These are not just any kind of cards. These are cards with like spiritual significance. And typically what happens is that the minor arcana is the elements, so they represent everyday life. Then the 22 major arcana cards are powerful spiritual lessons. And basically, they would use these cards to pretty much highlight what might happen, keyword might happen to a person's life. So if you want to see it as like, so it's like predicting somebody's future. Yeah, I guess it's just, a lot more complicated than that. And it's more so just being like spiritually aware of the fate that you have as a person. So, yeah, that's just one of the ways that it's done. Another way is palmistry. And with palmistry, this is basically interpreting the lines and features of hands to gain insight into a person's destiny, spiritual path, and character. It's used by mystics, so pretty much Hisoka's mom would probably be categorized as a mystic. So what would probably happen is when he was a young little child, she probably went, "Child, my baby, mijo, give me your hand." He would give his small palm to her, and she would read his hand using the lines within your palm. And she would basically say, "These are the things that might happen to you in your future." Right? Think again, based off of the fact that she was sick. I don't know when she did this. This was probably before she ended up getting sick, but she did not tell him, you know? Because it's like it just didn't feel right to tell a child that. But she probably told him everything else that would happen. And she probably hinted that something bad would happen to her, being like, something bad was going to happen to me. And you're going to be going through trials, tribulations, and challenges. But something beautiful will come about it in the end. Right? So, palmistry, literally reading the palms to gain insight into a person's destiny. Hence why things just had to happen the way that it did. You know, I think if she did read her past partner, aka Hosoka's dad's hand, it's like, I can't do nothing about this. I'm so afraid of him just disappearing and leaving. But what more can I do? A lot of the times it's just like let life be lifing, It's just like you can't control it. You just gotta let things happen. Like this is the path that's supposed to happen. It's the normal belief and normal mindset when it comes to divination. And again, we're going to add another kind of divination that also applies, which is bibliomancy. It's exactly what it sounds like, book divination. And yes, they typically use the Bible for this one. This is done with a sacred text, and this is traditionally done with focusing on a question and then flipping to the random page or pointing to your finger blindly at a section. So, this is how some people in general tend to read the Bible as well, but the passage you land on and interpret it in the context of your question, and it's probably done with the Bible. So, what happens here is that they would have a religious text of any kind. It doesn't have to be the Bible, but in the case of Hisoka's mom and just being of Hispanic Romani origins, and we talked about Roman Catholicism, it's probably going to be the Bible. What would happen is that she would probably have a book, the Bible, aka, and she would turn to a certain page. So after reading, like a destiny or fate of some kind, she wants a further explanation. She would use the sacred text to understand this fate or destiny even further. And again, this is read by triggering intuitive insight. So this pretty much gathers intuitive insight of just life and everything within it, and it's divine intervention. So being essentially having questions literally answered by God, if you will, being like, why is this happening? Why must this happen this way? And just having your questions answered through a book. Take a look inside a book, the reading rainbow. That kind of answer, you know? So just having a literal book, in this case, a sacred book, tell you that this happens and this happens for a reason. You know, it's the literal definition of this happens for a reason, here's the reason, and it's explained that way. And again, it's read in a more so spiritual way. So it's like they don't look at the page. It's not going through the table of contents. It's literally just flipping and it instantly turns to that specific page. So I guess the best way that I could illustrate it with another form of media is, I don't think it was Harry Potter, but honestly, a lot of TV shows involving magic will have not the Bible, but just like a book in general. And that book would turn to a specific portion, and the person may not even be using their hands, right? It just may have the book like turn the pages on its own, and then it will randomly have like the certain page being like, this is the da 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 spell or whatever that you're supposed to use. It's very much that kind of energy where it just turns to what essentially is supposed to happen. And that's bibliomancy for you. So that is pretty much the main kinds of divinations, other than water divination, that Ahsoka's mom essentially has given to him. So we're going to now be continuing into now raising a spiritually aware Hisoka. So like clairvoyance, intuition, all that kind of stuff. It's like, how was this implemented into this kid? What was going on? So, for Ahsoka's mom, we now understand that she understands Nen as a spiritually connected power slash practice. So, continuing on, okay, we're just gonna keep understanding that this is what she understands. Oh, also something additional to add to what I said last time. Tarots are believed to be a mirror of the soul and a map of humanity. So we understand, and I want to add on to the essentially the fact that cards are very sacred. Even like you could read tarots with playing cards. And I think that's essentially what she also taught to him later down the line. It was like that cards are sacred. They hold a sacred meaning and they hold a map of humanity. If you know how to read a card, you know how to read somebody's fate. And we already talked about minor arcana, but to add on, it also represents emotions, actions, thoughts, and the material concerns. So concerns of the earth. And they're a tool for introspection. So pretty much if Hisoka feels like there's a time period in which there's something that he's stuck on, right? The cards will normally read into what is supposed to happen or something that can be highlighted for the future, which is like the main basis of the clairvoyance, if you will. And then we have scurrying. Now, I don't see scurrying a lot, so I'll talk about it, but don't think that we see this mainly with this character, but it does add on to like water divination, and you'll see what I mean. So it's an ancient practice of looking at a reflective surface in a meditative state to reveal a message. Tools include crystal balls, still, water, mirrors, etc. So see how it applies with like water divination? So like what essentially happened is water scurrying might be Hisoka's village method of Nen divination. Like that's the specific method that they use for Nen divination, but they did not call it water divination. So that's probably why when he met Meritno, when he saw the water divination method, he was like, what the heck is this? Because either one, he didn't see it at all. Like it happened when he was a baby, but he just didn't see it at all because that's probably not the main thing that his mom used. I think his mom used more so like mirrors and crystal balls. I don't think she was a water gal, you know. Water was not her main thing. And if she did use water, it probably was in a different way. So it's like, how can you find out Nen this way? It's like, that's not how I've seen things get down where I'm from. But, you know, it got down that way. It got down that way. So, yeah, that's just some additional stuff. So going back, so it's a spiritually connected practice with Nen and how his mom understood it. And she wants her child to understand that. And she understood that her child was a very intuitive kid. Like this kid is right here, very intuitive. very intuitive kiddo, you know? And she might have guided him through shamanic teachings. So the type of teaching that she had is shamanic. So this is a teaching that pretty much is very heavy in spirituality. I'm talking like deeply heavy. And again, she is more on the mystic side of things, so that's probably why she taught him in this way. And we're going to show you how it was taught in a shamanic manner. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that word right, but shamanic manner, this is how a kid is taught. First thing you want to do is foster a deep connection to nature. You explore together, create natural altars, teach gratitude to the earth. It's probably the first thing that she's done. So what would happen is essentially have, again, the altars that we discussed in part 1. This is how that applies. So having those altars within the home and pretty much exploring together. So like going all over the place and basically talking about the different places and having a respect for Mother Nature, having respect for the natural order of things, as again was previously discussed in part 1. So that pretty much how that applies now within his childhood. And that's the first part. And then the next part is honoring cycles and rhythms, celebrating the seasons, following moon phases, creating rituals. So the rituals can vary. A lot of it again is Hinduistic by nature. So a lot of those rituals are sacred and they tend to practice that and celebrate the seasons. So it's a mixture of like they might celebrate Christmas, but they also might celebrate winter solstice. So it's a mixture of the two, right? Where it's like they will have essentially these Christian religions, but they will celebrate it in a more so quote unquote pagan kind of way. So that is number 2, or at least some of the ways, and honoring all cycles. So like again, the cycle of life, and we talked about the cycle of life, death, rebirth. So honoring that cycle every single time, honoring the rhythm of life, the rhythm of how things tend to move, the rhythm of the river, like things of that nature. So honoring all the cycles. And then you have number 3, which is encouraging intuitive play. Dream journals, guided meditations and prayer, free form art. So pretty much this is where creativity flies free, right? And it was like encouraging that creativity, encouraging imagination, encouraging play. Also having guided meditations and prayer, which really helps to basically harness Nen and pretty much maintain Nen, especially if you are a natural born Nen user. It's best to have meditation first and just having that kind of healthily manifest within your body so that when it expels outward, it's not as painful as it would be for an artificial initiation, which we'll kind of talk more about in a minute. But there's 2 types of initiations for Nen, and one of them is meditation, which is the most natural kind, and this is probably the kind that Hisoka's mother has used for him, so that later when he did use Nen with Marino, it didn't feel weird, it didn't feel like he was hurting himself. And that's because again the initiation process using meditation was already done. So it's like he was born with it, he had the genetics for it, he was predisposed, but on top of that, you have to cultivate it, right? You got to harvest it. And how you harvest that is with meditation. And that's essentially what she did. She was slowly training her son in a least painful manner. So shout out to mom, shout out to her. She was doing the damn thing. We got number 3, which is teaching mindfulness and gratitude, breathing exercises, gratitude practices. Again, a lot of meditation, especially when it comes to Nen. Meditation is important. We'll get to that in part 3 as to why, but just understand meditation, meditation, meditation. But quietly meditating in nature, again, to maintain Nen, to make sure it's not all over the place and erratic, to make sure that you are within control of your powers, is what is applied for the specific power that he's to have later, right? So That's just some of the ways it's done. And of course, number 5 is introduce animal and spirit guides. Storytelling with your child, dream animals, creating animal totems are also something that has probably happened within the home. And like animal totems, yeah, it might be like cows and stuff specifically for Hindu culture, but I know for like Native Americans, there's different kinds of totems as well for them. But I know with like Hindu culture, it's cows mostly, but there's other animals too. It's just mostly cows from what I've seen. It's not only cows, but it's like that's the main one I've seen where like that applies. Yeah. But it's besides just totems, it's also dream animals and storytelling with your child. So like connections with maybe if we're talking in the case of spirit animals, it's like foxes, probably for him. So it's like pretty much connecting with that and connecting with the nature of a fox, the nature of a trickster. Which we'll talk about the nature of a trickster and the trickster archetype way later when we get to him being an adult. But this is just a preemptive, right? It's like a prerequisite. It's like you're seeing kind of how that all began. Number 6, continuing on, is building a family ritual practice, morning rituals, seasonal ceremonies, family circles. So in this case, pretty much having that connection with his mom all the time, with having like family circles, or yeah, I guess you could still say circle even if it's two of them. Family pairs, I guess. Seasonal ceremonies, so going back to really honoring and harvesting the seasonal practices. Certain time periods are really important to basically cultivate like the most power, if you will. Then you have morning rituals, so pretty much meditating in the morning. Meditation. This will apply. This is very important later. You'll see what I mean in part 3, but meditation, meditation, meditation. That is the main thing that has been done throughout his whole early childhood. Then you have number 7, which is lead by example. Practice presence, share your journey with your child. So, pretty much practicing the presence, practicing controlling the energy for Nen without necessarily naming what it is yet, but just having that, road pathway to introduce these concepts in a safe way, to have it slowly manifest within your child, sharing that journey, and then showing compassion for the child's journey towards being eventually a powerful being. And this is just some of the ways that I think she might have done it for Hisoka, because again, there is the artificial initiation, which is a lot more painful, and we'll talk about that in part 3. But there's that, and there's also just like the less painful way of doing it. So just having all of that apply here, and having her as a mom just kind of be like, yeah, I'm introducing this to my child. I have to introduce it to him because this is what his powers are going to be like. Like, this is what our family is just naturally like. This is the genetics he has. I have to make sure that when the day comes where his powers are revealed in a way, it's not painful. So it's like she already initiated it. She already opened the nodes, which again, we'll talk about in part 3 in a minute. But she already opened it up. And she's doing it in a way that's like slow, gradual, safe. Because she already knew that this was eventually everything that was going to happen. And it's like, again, shout out to mom, shout out to her. Would things turned out to have been different? Maybe it would have, But I think that this just had to happen. And this just had to be what it is. And what it is that she had to essentially open up her son in a way that was safe, in a way that prevented him harm, in a way that, created a form of balance with his power. Now, how he uses it as an adult is way different. But I will say this, compared to pretty much everybody else within the series, I'm pretty sure he's one of the few people that had a natural initiation, aka meditation. I don't think everybody else in the series had that. I'm pretty sure everybody else's was artificial. His was probably the only one where it's like slow but steady, which I mean, probably understand to a wide degree. Like, I probably get why essentially he probably has better control of it, of his powers, right? It's like not only that, it's like it's powerful, but in a surprisingly controlled manner. Like, he knows what it is. And he knows what it is because of how it eventually cultivated over time. And he has such a high knowledge of Nen. And I think that's the mixture of all the adults that influenced him in his life. But it started with his mom. His mom gave him the starting point, a very strong foundation at that. And that's basically what he's been using. Also, I want to continue and kind of touch into something that I did not talk about in part one, but I will talk about in here before I forget. This is some things that I think later for Hisoka might apply. So essentially, going back to number one, which is part one, the Romani religious practices, there's different denominations, and I'm going to talk about one of them, which is Sharkvika. And Sharkvika, and we'll talk about this way more later in his adulthood, but I want to introduce the concept of Sharkvika. This is basically their version of hedonism. So, with this belief, is that they believe that life is full of enjoyment, and they're also not a big believer in the afterlife. I think for him, there might have been a moment of where it bounces between, like, I'm not sure, to maybe, to just fully believing it. And that's probably happened after his death. I guess, spoiler warning for those of you that have not gotten to that part, but like after his death and probably seeing the afterlife for himself, maybe seeing his mom down in the afterlife, being like, whoa, so that does exist, you know? But I don't think that's his major point of concern, right? I just don't think that that's a major concern for Ahsoka, where it's like whether or not the afterlife exists. It's like, I'm sure low key, contrary to like what this belief system is, it's like I'm sure he already has that belief that it's there. That's not what he's trying to debate. I think it's just more so the concept of death that brings like a morbid curiosity towards him, right? I think the concept of things like the afterlife, I don't want to say excites him, but it definitely brings about a sense of curiosity in some kind of way. So when I say might change after his death, I don't think he didn't believe in the afterlife in particular. I just think he might have had some preconceived doubts, maybe, right? But it went from doubts to like just curiosity. It's like, I just want to see what it's like to be not of this earth anymore, to be beyond earthly planes. And I mean, we all had that kind of curiosity. Would it be a stretch? I'm probably going to answer my own question as to why he feels that way and when we get to his teen and adulthood. But that's kind of one of the, ideas that he definitely has. And again, going back to like hedonism, which we'll talk more about later. And yeah, just introducing that concept, but also adding on to that, another thing that I want to kind of talk about before I move on to part three is that he might also believe in Tantra. And this is again all about balance. And we kind of see this throughout the series. I'll talk about this more again when I get to his adulthood. But Tantra is the belief of balance. So by tapping to the elements of the universe, you can alter reality. Going back and how this connects to him and the afterlife, right? Is like essentially you can alter fate. You don't have to follow the particular line that fate gives you, which is a common belief that tricksters have in general. They don't believe in following the lines. They don't believe in essentially just, keeping up with the Joneses, keeping with the status quo. They want to change it. They want to change the fate that's given. They want to shake things up because change brings innovation. And we'll talk about this more when he's an adult. But for right now, that is kind of the basic beliefs that definitely get touched on more. Is a teenager, even. So maybe not even in adulthood when we hear these concepts. You'll start hearing them more when he gets to be a teenager. He definitely starts growing into the trickster archetype when he gets older. But for right now, that's just the concepts that I want to introduce to you. And yeah, that's everything for part two, which pertains to essentially how his mom brought down the basic foundations. So we're going to continue that, but now we're going to also use actual Nen as evidence for part three. So that's going to be the fun part. That's going to be the fun part. And we're just going to have that apply here. I'll see you guys for part three. So when we get to part three, it's going to talk about the actual connection to Nen and how that applies to Ahsoka as well, using manga evidence. So that's going to be fun for us. So I'll see you guys after this particular intermission, and then you can come back for part three.